Hi, everyone. My name's Pake Wise. We're going to do a new podcast series called Learn to Hunt, presented by the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. So, like I said, my name's Pake. I'm the Hunter Education Coordinator for the Wildlife Department. I'm here with Jeff Pennington. I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we'll kind of get into what we're going to talk about today. So,
Well, Jeff Pennington here, 33 years in the wildlife department. First 19 years I spent as a biologist there west of the Tulsa metro area. And the last 14 years, I've been the Central Region Wildlife Supervisor. Um, One of the duties with the Central Region Wildlife Supervisor is the Feral Hog Coordinator. So, represent the department. While feral hogs are not considered wildlife, we do have to deal with them with our wild animals. So, all things wild hog, in terms of meetings and science and that type of stuff, I'm the department representative on that.
cool.
So,
Good deal. So, what made you want to get into this line of work? Like, what made you want to become a biologist? And
I just always had a love for the outdoors and was in a family that spent time hunting and fishing and doing that type of thing. And so that just naturally gravitated that way. So and I've loved it ever since. I've always thought I've had the best job in the world. And 33 years in, I'm still motivated and still like to get things done. And for the wildlife resource and for the constituents there.
Yep. So I have a real similar story to that. I started out as an engineering major and was actually 4 years into a mechanical engineering degree, and then
Wow.
came home and told my parents, "Hey, I'm gonna switch degrees." And mom said, "What are you gonna do?" I said, "I'm gonna do wildlife biology." And she went, "Do they make as much as an engineer?" I said, "No, but but I'm not enjoying the engineering." And like you said, I grew up hunting, fishing, and I sat down with myself one day. I was like, "What am I passionate about?" And it was wildlife. And so I was like, "I think this would be a good career change here, or a good plan for my future." So, but yeah, so
Well,
yeah, real similar stories.
while we're kind of on that line, my whole adult life after college, I've lived in Sand Springs, and
Hmm.
Pake went to high school and everything from Sand Springs and knew him there and everything. And he's got that beard now, but if he shaves that beard off, Pake's got a baby face. He really does. That beard changes his appearance, makes him really look like a man now. Where
Yeah,
he had that baby face before the beard. But
there's a
anyway,
reason. There's a reason that the only time I've been clean shaven in the last 6 or 7 years is when I interviewed for this job.
I got you.
The day after that, I was like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna shave again for a while." So, but well, all right. Well, let's get into the hog stuff. Real basic. What are feral hogs? What are feral swine?
Well, feral swine are, as the name implies, they're hogs that have gone wild out on the landscape, for various reasons. A lot of them initially started from in on the North American continent from hogs that the explorers brought for an easy food source. They would release them and then gather them up whenever they needed some food,
Hmm.
and they would, as you can see, these hogs are very successful at reproducing, and
Yeah.
with a minimal or no amount of care, they could just let them roam, and then they could harvest them as they needed for an additional food source. Since that time, they've they've spread out on the landscape a lot due to human means, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But they're basically the same types. If you check the genetics on these pigs, a lot of the breeds that you have, your Durocs or Hamps, or they're going to be a mix of all of those
Hmm.
types of hogs. And then in some places, they will have some Eurasian wild boar genes in the mix too. It, different amounts in different locations. So you've got kind of a Heinz 57 pig running around out there on the landscape. So
Yeah.
that's what they are. They're the domesticated pigs that have run wild and are completely don't need man's care anymore, and they're just out there making a living off of the land like wildlife.
Yeah.
And we don't classify them as wildlife though. They're feral animals.
Yeah.
So, we're with the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. We care about the deer and the turkeys and the scissor tails and all of that, but we don't really classify feral hogs in the same category as that. We don't consider them wildlife.
Yeah. It'd be like trying to call an escaped cow a wild cow. Like,
Yeah,
that's not really wildlife. It's
yeah,
that's a domesticated animal. I know me and you've talked about this, but just kind of give the people at home my background. Um, before I started working for wildlife department, I worked for USDA Wildlife Services for 5 years. That was my first job out of college, and USDA is primarily focused. Their big focus is feral hog control, particularly. on agricultural resources. So I worked in a couple different counties, a few different counties across the state. Um, Mostly trapping. I mean, trapping is what we mostly did. But yeah, you talk about the mix of genetics. It was always cool to me. You'd go to places, and 90% of the pigs you find are the razorback, the stereotypical jet black pig. But then every now and then you get some that are spotted or blonde or tan or black and red spots or black and white spots, red and white spots. I mean, you get all
Yeah.
kinds.
Hodgepodge.
I've seen some that we were pretty sure might have been first generation wild pigs. I mean, they look like hamps that just walked off a farm.
Yeah.
So I mean, they had the little white socks and everything. But yeah, that stuff was always fun. It's a, they're a I hate to say it, but they're kind of a blight on the landscape. They destroy all kinds of stuff, especially on agricultural and native resources. They're a problem with that. So, um, do we have any idea on about how many we have in the state?
We
Is there
really don't. And prior to 2016, we didn't really even know how many hunters we had that
Mhm.
pursued them, and we didn't really have any idea on control. And we still really don't. But starting in 2016, we do a game harvest survey. Some of our listeners may have participated in the game harvest survey. At the end of every year, we'll do a telephone survey and ask, how many quail did you kill? How many days did you hunt quail? Well, in 2016, we added feral hogs to the list to try to get a database of, number one, how many people are hunting hogs, and get an estimate of how many hogs are being killed by licensed hunters
Yeah.
in Oklahoma. Now, of course, you don't have to have a hunting license on private property to be able to pursue pigs. So it's not an exact science, but we do have at least some information now. And our numbers show that there's approximately 60 to 65,000 licensed hunters in Oklahoma that pursue pigs. And our numbers suggest that they're killing 3, 4, 5 times the number of deer that are being killed out on the landscape, which some
That's
people will,
that's a big number.
yeah, some people will think, well, man, that's big. But you think about it, it's a year long. There's not a season. There's not a
Mhm.
bag limit. And then some people are trapping them, and some people are quite effective at trapping them, and they can get high numbers of pigs caught that way. So the the number, like I said, it varies in our game harvest survey every year, but it suggests that the Oklahoma hunters are killing 3 to 5 times the number of pigs per year, either via hunting or trapping, than we kill with our deer season. When we're killing about an eighth of a million deer per year.
So we're
So
looking somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 to 600,000 pigs a
yeah,
year.
that's what the game harvest survey suggests. So that's a lot of pigs.
That's
But
that's a
the
bunch of
science
pigs.
suggests you've got to kill 65% of them
Mhm.
to have the same number next year. They have such a high reproductive potential.
Yeah, that's just to maintain your population. If your population's a million and you killed 650,000 pigs, the next year you still have a million.
That's
That
right.
doesn't even start reducing numbers,
Yeah. That's
which
that's why they're a problem, and why they're a growing problem is because of that resiliency. They're smart. Um, they're difficult to hunt once they get pressured,
Mhm.
and they're difficult to trap once they've been pressured.
Yeah.
So they're it's different. It's difficult to effectively control them, and that's why they're so successful in their realm on the landscape, and why they're becoming a bigger and bigger problem. If you look at the harvest rate, it's just going steadily up since we've started doing that survey in
Mhm.
2016. We ask that question the exact same way every year, and it's going up. Where some of our other animals like quail and rabbits and stuff, that harvest, it zigzags, but it's going
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
Hogs is going up, and I don't look for that to change.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned their resiliency and how well they manage to survive. I mean, I've never encountered an animal that honestly, quite honestly, is that smart. I think they're smarter than raccoons. They're smarter than coyotes. I have never seen an animal that is able to adapt to so many different environments and be as successful as they are. I mean, you could drop them off. I'm convinced you could drop them off in the middle of the desert, and in 5 years, you go from 20 to 5,000 pigs.
Yeah.
They just find ways to survive. In my experience, the only two things that I've ever seen that consistently uh, causing problems is the heat. They don't handle heat real well, or bullets. So
Yeah.
those are really the only two things. I mean, there's a few we would find some here and there that have been predated on by a coyote, but that was so rare. I mean, once that pig is 30 pounds. That pig's big enough at that point that he can fend himself off from a coyote or a sow either way. And they spend so much time with the sows and the sows are so protective of those
Yeah.
piglets that the success rate of litters is really high.
Yes.
I mean, that's what's the shocking part is she may drop. I'm just gonna throw some anecdotal numbers out here, but if she drops 10 pigs, I bet you at least 8 of them are gonna make it to adulthood.
Yeah.
It's astounding how well they manage to survive. But, so and kinda in that kinda brings us to our next question. So how are they affecting the native wildlife? What do they do? How are they affecting that?
There's certainly something that we wish we didn't have any in the state.
Mhm.
You know, people like to hunt them, and heck, it's fun. It's fun to shoot them.
Yep.
It is. But in terms of people that I've heard people say before that didn't have them, man, I wish I had some. No, you don't. You don't want them.
Mhm.
They there's a number of reasons why. Number one, they compete with wildlife for the food resources. So you've got an animal out here that is going to be a good sized animal that's going to consume 4% of its body weight in food per day. And that might not sound like a lot, but these groups, a sounder of pigs is a group of females and their offspring from that year. And a good round number for a sounder might be 1,000 pounds. So if you've got 1,000 pound sounder of pigs out here, they're going to eat 40 pounds of food per day. And you think, well, that's not all that much, right? Well, that's almost 15,000 pounds of food per year. That's a lot of acorns. That's a lot of persimmons. That's a lot of things
Yep.
that the deer and the turkeys and livestock, whatever it may be, that's food that's being removed off of the landscape. So, number one, from a food competition standpoint, you don't want them. And number two, they're not an effective predator per se, like they're going to chase something down and grab it
Mhm.
and, like a bobcat or something like that that has the canines and the claws to really reach out there.
Yeah.
But if something can't get away from them, they'll eat it. And whether that's a turkey nest or whether that's uh, reptiles and amphibians just get obliterated by these hogs because they're generally slow. They can't get away, especially during cooler periods when they're kind of in a state
Mhm.
of torpor. These hogs are able to root around in the leaves and under rocks and stuff like that and find them and consume them, and a great deal of them. So, so they compete with wildlife for food. The wildlife can become the food. They've even documented where they've eaten deer fawns.
Mhm.
So, and then the third thing, they are a huge disease vector for
Yep.
wildlife. And wildlife diseases are it's poorly understood because, if me or you get sick, if me or you get sick, we'll go to the doctor and say, "Hey, doc, I've got flu-like symptoms here. Let me." Wildlife doesn't volunteer that information, so
Yeah.
we have a poor understanding of wildlife diseases and how things like hogs can be a reservoir for disease and spread disease out on the landscape. We know that they have swine brucellosis and pseudorabies and also leptospirosis are also
Mhm.
those are the three biggies that we know of with hogs. But there's a lot of things that, like I said, were just poorly understood, and we know those three diseases can have impacts to domestic animals and wildlife. So for many reasons, you don't want feral hogs on your place. And really, if you do have them on your place, it's, you think about enhancing the habitat. One way you can enhance the habitat is to control feral hogs and effective ways of doing that. I guess maybe we might be talking about in a minute, but, um, hunting is fun. Hunting is not a real effective method of controlling animals
Yeah. So,
or controlling feral hogs.
well,
Put
I
it that
guess
way.
while we're talking about it, let's just go ahead and jump into that. Um, what are some of the more common methods of I don't want to say eradication, but control?
The most common, at least what people consider control, is your typical hunting.
Yeah.
That's the most common. Now, when you say most effective, that's different.
Mhm.
So your two effective means of controlling hogs are going to be trapping, especially
Yep.
trapping mechanisms that try to catch that whole sounder at once. Because, like you mentioned, they're so smart. If you try to trap those pigs and you use a conventional trial style trap or even one of those little small box traps, you'll catch a pig, yep, and usually you'll catch a juvenile or two. And then on your conventional corral style traps, if you don't set it right, You can catch a lot of young pigs,
Mhm.
but when it comes to catching that whole sounder, it's important because the last ones to typically go in those traps are those older sows. They're smarter.
Yep.
They won't go in there, and they're real reluctant to go in there. And if you don't catch them, then they become like super untrappable pigs
Yeah.
that are out there reproducing on the landscape and soon fill the void that you've created by catching those small ones. So trapping, number one, that's probably the one that's also the if people really wanted to, everybody
Yes.
could do this,
Yes.
with a little instruction. And there's a lot of YouTube videos out there now that can teach you how to do it. But you want to set these traps up in a manner to where you're trying to catch that whole sounder. Is that's your goal? Whether you use one of the smart traps that you set off with your smartphone, or whether you use a conventional style trap that you just bait it up for a while and get them really used to coming in before you set your trip stick. But the other mechanism that's very effective is aerial gunning, especially in areas
Mhm.
that don't have a lot of dense woody vegetation, and that's done in generally in the wintertime when the leaves are off of the trees,
Yep.
and your aerial
Yep.
gunners can see those hogs and put them down. Though there's been a cost analysis studies done. Your cost per pig using the trapping and the aerial gunning is so much more effective than
Yep.
and you really very rarely are you ever going to be effective with just hunting. I don't care whether you're doing it with thermals at night or whether you're doing it with dogs, all of those things. Um, while it's better than absolutely no control, if nobody's trapping and nobody's aerial gunning, shooting some, and but in general, it's best to leave those pigs alone. Try to sit up and trap them
Yeah.
instead of
So
pressuring them.
yeah. So when I was working for USDA, that was we the way we always tried to explain it was you want to use a suite of methods. No one method is 100% effective. So we would say, yeah, I mean, shooting and dogs, they have their place. It's very niche when you're talking about when you're saying, hey, I want to get rid of the pigs. Those methods work for cleanup. So if I go out and say you got a sounder of pigs, it's 20, and I get out a trap and I have 18 pigs that come in one night, it's worth it to go ahead and shut the gate on those 18 and say, instead of trying to wait on the 20 and then lose them all, go ahead and catch those
Mhm.
18. And if you can't catch the last two, yeah, go run dogs on them, or wait for them to come out one night and shoot them with a thermal. Those are perfectly fine methods for that. But where people get, I think where they mess up is they go out and find that group of 20, and instead of setting up a trap, they decide to shoot at them.
Yeah.
I worked with some guys that could stink and shoot. Uh, and we could go out on a group of pigs like that and they might kill 6 or 7.
Yeah.
They're just by the time you start shooting and they start running, you have to be an incredibly good shot, especially
Yeah.
with a thermal, because there's a trick to shooting with thermals. It's and so I think a lot of people, and another part of that is everybody walks up and they see that group of sound or that sounder, they want to shoot that big boar that's in that group. And so they get on him, they shoot him, and they try to make sure they knock him down until they move on to the sows or the piglets. When in reality, I mean, killing that boar did absolutely nothing in terms of population reduction. Um, I mean, you get rid of him, that sounder's going to run 5 miles, and in that 5 miles, she's going to pick up another 5 or 6 boars. So, and she's just going to get bred again.
Yeah.
But so yeah, back to kind of the suite of things. So trapping was always the most effective in terms of long term, year over year round control, because that is something you can set up, and if you do it right, you can just leave that trap set, just bait it every once in a while once you start seeing the pigs, and you can catch those pigs year round. Um, and then, like you said, your cost per pig with the helicopter it's shocking how low it is actually, because you would think, oh, it's you got to pay for your fuel, you got to pay your pilots, you got to pay for insurance, and that is very expensive to run. But the number of pigs that you can put down doing that,
You're smacking.
yes, the sheer volume drastically reduces the price. Um, and you're right. We did it when I was with USDA. I was an aerial gunner. I did it for 2 seasons. And in Northeast Oklahoma, or really the whole eastern half of the state, we could only do it from. We would usually wait till the end of deer season so that we didn't have a ton of people out in the woods, and then we could fly through the south side of the state. We could fly to about April, and then on the northern end of the state, we could fly a couple weeks into April, just following the green as the trees and stuff greened up. Because as soon as the leaves come out, you can't see the ground, and so it doesn't
Yeah.
do any good anymore. Because you can fly timber all day long, But if you can't see what you're pushing, then you don't know. You're
Sure.
spinning your wheels. So yeah, so in that winter season or pre-spring, when you can see the ground, you can push those pigs a long way, and really try to hammer down large numbers of pigs over a large area. Um, but yeah, trapping. That's another thing. You mentioned the smart traps. That's what we used were smart traps. The cell phone cameras with the live feed video and the remote triggers, and those are really great, and they certainly have their place. But they are not cheap. They are not cheap. One upfront, the upfront cost is expensive, and they are not cheap to maintain. Internet, the cell service for those cameras is expensive. You have to have cell service. If you don't
Yeah.
have cell
Yeah.
service, then it doesn't work at all. Um, and so I would have landowners like, man, I'd really like to get my own trap. I can't go spend
Sure.
$6,000 to $10,000 on a trap. And like, oh no, completely understand that. And they would ask me, is there anything I can do? And I'm like, you can get as cheap. You can make it as cheap as you want and be real effective. Matter of fact, I knew trappers that they weren't real big fans of the electronic traps, just because that was more things that could go wrong. Um, what they like to use was cattle panels, like 5 foot tall cattle panels, and T-posts. And you
Hmm.
just run that, and then you'd have to fabricate a gate or buy one. But once you do that, you can set your tripwire. If you get good at it, you can start catching big groups of pigs. Um, Ideally, I wouldn't want to do that if I was trying to catch large groups, especially starting out. But there are still cell camera setups that you can do that are much cheaper, where it's literally just a trail camera. It's just a picture. You can set it to send it every 15 seconds, 30 seconds, minute, 10 minutes, whatever. And you see the picture, you text a little code, and it pulls a pin, drops a gate. Those systems are actually pretty cheap,
Okay.
and they're cheap to run. And like I said, your material cost, like you said, is much lower. And most guys that own land like that, big farmers, ranches, they're going to have a load of that stuff just laying
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
anyway. So I mean, you could almost do it almost for free. But trapping really is what is effective at removing large numbers of pigs.
Yeah. So much more effective than hunting. So
Yes.
much more.
Yep. Yep. Um, so on the WMAs, how much damage do we know? Do we have any kind of estimate on how much damage they're causing a year?
We really don't have a number. We
Okay.
really don't. You've got things that are hard to put a dollar figure on.
Yeah.
Like I was at one of our WMAs here back last spring, and they like to eat roots and tubers. That's part of what they eat when they're rooting around. They're looking for invertebrates. When I say invertebrates, I'm talking about different types of insects or insect larvae or
Yep.
worms. But they're also looking for roots and tubers and those types of things. And there was a place that had a particular. I'm kind of a plant nerd, so there was a big stretch of an area that had some wild onions in it, Drummond's onion. Not the kind that you see growing in your yard. But anyway, these hogs tore this whole land up to get
Hmm.
those little plant parts that were down below the ground. And so, how do you put a dollar figure on that?
Yeah.
Um, it's habitat damage, it's ecosystem
Yep.
damage, but it didn't dollar figure wise, it didn't really do like if they were consuming a farmer's corn
Yeah.
crop or
Yep.
milo crop or watermelons or whatever the crop may
Hmm.
be, where you can put a dollar. So we really don't have a dollar figure. We just know that they're a huge problem on the landscape. On some of our WMAs, you know, we don't have lessees that are, the lessees have to battle a lot of different
Yep.
potential things, flooding or drought. Well, now something that they didn't have to deal with 30 or 40 years ago was feral hogs. Now they've got to worry about feral hogs. So,
Yep.
you can't hardly get anyone to plant high wildlife value crops like corn
Yeah.
because now they've got hogs to worry about too, in addition to
Hmm.
all those other things.
Yeah.
So,
I think
uh,
people would be shocked at the amount of damage. I mean, even a smaller group of pigs that's 15 to 20, how much damage that group of pigs can do on a cornfield in just a few nights.
sure.
I mean, I've seen cornfields, 40, 60 acre fields where they've lost half of that yield in 3 days. Those
Yeah.
pigs that come in there and they stomp it down.
Yeah,
And
like I said, they eat it, but then there's also that trampling damage that makes
yes,
it to where, they can't harvest it because it's laying on the ground now.
yeah. Well, and then and I felt so bad for a lot of farmers on those, especially cornfields, because a lot of times corn's planted close to water. and pigs need shelter, water, and food in order to survive. A cornfield produces food and shelter so they can live in it, and it's going to be close to water. And so a lot of times those pigs live in that field throughout the summer. And if you're the farmer driving down the road and you just kind of look over at your field, from the road, it probably looks fine. And then I don't know how many farmers would call me and they say, "Man, I went out to cut my corn today, and from the road, everything looked great. Get to the middle of that field, and I've lost half my half my crop."
Yeah, if they didn't take a drone or something up,
Yeah,
they wouldn't have ever known.
yep, exactly. Because you can't see from the road because they're living in the middle of that field, and they just go in and destroy stuff. And then you start talking in dollar figure again. Is well, now how do you quantify his fuel and his time, and if he breaks an axle driving across the field and snaps the axle hitting rooting, um, it causes all kinds of problems.
Yes. Yep.
But let's see. So, how do we go about this? What's the W or the department stance on pigs? Like, what? I know you said we don't list them as a wildlife species, but are they wanting eradication? Do they
Oh
want?
yeah, we would
Okay,
if we could push like a button right here, like I
the
would,
easy button.
I, I'd be stabbing it, I'd be pushing it. I'm like, whoo, get that, push that button. That's what, I'd be pushing it quick, if I could, like, yeah, we wish we didn't have them at all.
Yeah,
We wish we did not have one pig, one feral hog in the state,
yeah,
you know, and even control is a challenge. I wish I'd do backflips right here, right now, if we could keep the number of pigs that we have right now. But it's going to on a landscape level, of course, on a local level, this might not hold true, but on a landscape level, we're going to have a bigger problem with feral hogs
yeah,
in 5 years than we have today, and in 10 years we'll have a bigger problem than that.
yep,
It's something that is going to be a big challenge of that, unless there's some kind of breakthrough. The only control is going to happen on a local level. So that's why it's important, if for people that are wanting to enhance the habitat on their place, they really should consider some hog control in there, in addition to their whole habitat management package, because it can pay off.
yep.
So
So, well, where can people go to find out some more information on feral hogs?
that's a good question. There's all kinds of information on YouTube.
Hmm.
Some of it good, some of it bad, but Mississippi State has kind of a good information on
Hmm.
feral hogs. The Noble Foundation, that publication that my old friend Russell Stevens, who passed away here a couple years ago, he put out a publication like 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago now, but it's a really good publication of the feral hog as it pertains to Oklahoma, and it's still, even though it's dated now, it's still a good piece of work. And if people in Oklahoma would want to look at it, I believe there that would still be available on the internet, and it talks about things that's like what year the counties first started having pigs. It's kind of interesting to look at that, and then it shows the feral hog density 30 years ago, and then it shows the
Hmm.
density today, or when that thing was published. And you could see the change in the hog density, and so it's an interesting publication. And it talks about control. It talks about the biology of pigs and all of those types of things. So that that's probably still the best resource for Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And then there's all kinds of science. Drones are getting to be a bigger deal on
Hmm.
in terms of locating pigs and how to how to find them. Whether to start your trapping efforts, or whether you do using the thermals
Yep.
to shoot them at night, where that's legal and everything. Person needs to be sure that they're doing what they need to do to
Yeah.
stay within the law,
Make sure you follow
especially
your regs and
yeah,
laws.
yeah, especially during big game seasons. But anyway, that'd be some good places to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of before we wrap up here, I just kind of want to touch back because you kind of made a mention of it earlier, and you were talking about how pigs how they disperse across the landscape.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people would assume that they do it the same way everything else does, where it's on foot, and that is not the case.
Yeah, that hasn't been the case. Unfortunately, um, hunters got hunters, hog hunters spread pigs across this state. And people with an economic interest in hogs. And I'm painting with a real broad brush when I'm saying that. a very small percentage of them actually did
Yeah.
the moving.
Yep.
But, 90, 98, 99% of them didn't, but some of them did. And the reason, like when I started in the wildlife department in 1992, there was one little bitty pocket of pigs out by Hallett, Oklahoma, west of Tulsa, I'm talking about. There were not any other feral hogs. It wasn't long after that that little island populations of pigs started popping
Yep.
up. And then those island pockets spread the conventional way, like what you're talking
Yep.
about, like when the department started stocking deer and turkeys in the 40s and 50s and 60s. Those individual stockings ended up growing, but those initial planted
Yep.
stockings came from those people who were illegally transporting them. That was not legal, but some people did it, and
Yeah.
it's very difficult to catch anybody. I don't know that anybody had ever been caught.
You'd have to pull over every stock trailer you
Yep.
saw on a highway.
Yeah. So that's how they got spread on the landscape, and that's led to what we have today.
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of distribution across the state, if that hadn't been done, there have been hogs for decades down in the settlers used to just like kind of let them roam the hills or whatever down in some of the mountains in southeast Oklahoma. And when I was a kid, that's how it was. Um, I remember the first hogs I ever saw in the early '80s in the Arbuckles.
Yep.
But in general, South Central and Southeast had them first, then South Central, then kind of West Central. But then how did those pigs get to move?
Yeah.
They didn't migrate there.
Yeah.
They migrated in the back of someone's trailer and they illegally let them go. That's
That's what
started what happened.
when I was driving for USDA, that was a question I got all the time. Well, how did these pigs even get here? I mean, I'd have landowners 10 years ago, you didn't see any, and now I deal with pigs year round all the time. And they said, do they just walk up here? And I said, no. I said, pigs don't go real far on foot. Those pigs are fine living in very large groups most of the time. So even if you had a bunch of pigs in an area, they're okay living in large groups. I said they go real far by highway, and they'd always kind of look at me, what do you mean? I was like, people put them in a trailer, and they load them up, take them over, and they dump them out on their place, thinking they're gonna keep them in, especially like a high fence. This, oh, well, we got a high fence, we'll dump these pigs out here, and it'll keep them in. There's not a fence out there that can hold a pig.
I've always heard it said that if your fence can hold water, that it can hold that it can hold pigs. So if you get a eventually, yeah, there's good fences and there's double fences and everything, but eventually they're going to get
Yeah, they're gonna outsmart that fence at some point. They're gonna find a way out of it. But well, I think that's gonna kind of wrap us up. Before we close, you just got any fun hunting stories? Your favorite hunting story?
I haven't killed just an enormous number of pigs. Like I said, the first my grandfather told me about them
Mm-hmm.
and he had a place in the Arbuckles that we could go. This is in the mid '80s there, and I remember thinking, man, I'm gonna kill a bunch of them when I see them. And I was up in a tree stand deer hunting, and there was a sounder coming my way, and I thought I'm gonna wait until they get right on top of me, and I'm gonna get 4 or 5 of them before they get back into that brush. Because it was like a 40-yard gap there, and like you said, I they moved so fast. I shot. I waited till they got right underneath my tree. I shot the first one, bam, dropped it, jack another shell in, and I look up through my scope, and they're in the brush already. And I'm like, wow, these things are hard to kill. And
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then it's kind of funny. The same thing happened to me just a couple years ago. I mainly hunt deer on the wildlife management areas, but I was hunting on one of the wildlife areas during deer gun season, and a sounder came up on me again, and I thought same thing. I'm gonna wait until they're right on top of me, and then I'm gonna smack me 2 or 3 of them, and I shoot one, and I didn't get the shot off. They were in the brush before I could get the second one.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's crazy. It's hard to kill. It's hard to effectively kill them with the
Yep. Yeah, they're for big and slow as they look, they're extremely athletic.
yeah.
And they can get out of there in a hurry. So, well, I appreciate you coming by and talking to me today,
You
Jeff.
bet.
Um,
I enjoyed it.
been a good conversation. So, um, yeah, so that'll kind of wrap us up for today. This was a Learn to Hunt presented to you by Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. Thanks.